want to have to tell you what to do. We want to capture it.
I was just saying that quickly right before you came on that I am still doing these lives because I feel like, especially during important moments in the world, in our country, the artists, painters, actors, directors, writers, we are the ones who hold up a mirror to society. We are the ones who need to keep being inspired and to keep, talking and showing and chronicling what's happening. And so I didn't want to just stop inspiring actors and giving back to actors. I wanted to keep doing these talks because I think artists and actors are important in our lifetime and in the times that we're in. Anyway, that's just me talking, but I am so honored that you said yes to come on.
Yeah, my pleasure. How are you? You look great.
Oh, thank you. So do you.
Yeah, I because of your relationship with Devin, I followed your whole journey on Facebook, and it was really an amazing story watching you deal with your illness and overcoming it. Not just overcoming it, but thriving and kind of evolving in this beautiful way. So I commend you for being a great example of how to take adversity and turn it into something that I think you would probably agree made you a more fulfilled person, right?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, it really, when you face your death like that, it really makes you think about every day and how you make that day important and what I wanted to do in order to help other people. It threw me sort of into a life of service in a way of, I just decided I was going to shine the light as much as I could and give as much information as I could. And that's part of what I'm doing here on this, even though it's about acting. But I do it sort of in all areas of my life. I just feel like at this point, I just turned 50 and I didn't know I was going to make it to 50. So I feel like I have a bunch of like stuff running around in my head, and maybe it will help one person by talking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great thing.
So I have a bunch of questions for you if you're down.
Sure, I'm here.
Okay, great. So I just, first of all, I just want to say I'm really honored, and I feel like you're such a true artist. You're a musician, you're a singer, you're an artist, you're an actor, you're a director. It's like you were put on the planet to do art is how I feel about you. And
I think so too. I think I certainly my predispositions that I came into this world with lent myself to becoming an artist, for sure. No doubt about it.
And there's people that are watching. Most of the people that watch are actors, and they're on all levels. Some are just beginning, some have been acting for a long time. And I just wanted to dive right into like the beginning of your career, of your journey. I know that you started in the theater, and I just wanted you to maybe give us a little bit of an overview of how you even got into acting in the first place.
Yeah, it's I can do a long time on it, but the interesting thing was I never thought about acting until I was 15. And then in retrospect, there was writing on the walls earlier. I would kind of play make believe with friends in the neighborhood, recreating shows like Lost in Space, or we would kind of do these kind of ad-lib these West Side Story scenes with the sticks that came from ice cream in fourth grade. And so there was this kind of there was something going on, and I was a bit of a clown in class, for sure. And then I didn't think about it until I went to see the movie Grease. I was
Oh,
15. I was living in Florida with my dad. I'd never thought about it, and I had an epiphany, almost a religious thing, where I was a disaster of a student. I was in trouble all the time. I was kicked out of schools. I didn't pass. I don't think I passed a grade from a test from the seventh grade on,
oh no.
and I ended up taking a GED, which I cheated on. But I I I something about the fun that John Travolta was having um, hit me like, wow, I can have fun. Like, and if I can get paid and have fun, and it just was like, that was it. And ironically, I worked with him a few times in the future, and he told me a lot of actors, including Nick Cage, and people had told him that was, I wouldn't say he's the reason I'm an actor, but he was the big catalyst.
Really?
And I walked out of the movie theater and I said to my friend Tony, uh, I said, I'm going to be an actor, as if I had always planned it. And he was like, oh, I didn't know that. And I was like, oh, yeah. And that was it. I had like a raison d'etre. And I wound up in New York City before I was 18 and had a classic kind of starving actor years of working 1,000 jobs. And my way in, which is the advice that I share, my way in was through kind of gopher PA, which led to technical jobs, assistant stage manager, assistant techno director, assistant lighting director. All these jobs that I did for years got me into the theater, eventually leading me to directors and opportunities. In direct, and Devin, my wife, was working as a receptionist for Michael Bennett, who was the great theater impresario who created Chorus Line and Dreamgirls. And I was working in his organization as a gopher, and he was directing a play, a drama, the first and only drama I think he ever directed. And I was in love with Devin at that point, but we weren't, we didn't get together for years later. But she got me the audition for Michael for the play, and I got it. And that put me on the map. I got an agent from that. I got good reviews in the New York papers. And but I always say to people, don't waste your time trying to find an agent. Study and do whatever you can. Get around the business. Be in it. See it. Watch it. And absorb the way things work. Because that really taught me a lot, and I got to really see how things work before I had to really be in the middle of it.
Yeah, there's so much that you can do. It's like an agent is such a small part. There's so much to absorb and learn. I mean, I was sweeping the floors out of theater just so I couldn't afford to watch the plays. So I swept the floors.
Absolutely. That's what I say, everyone. I mean, I'm not trying to discount. Agents are obviously crucial at the right point, but they come,
Yeah.
My first agent came when I got good reviews, and I was doing work that merited it, and I was ready. You also need to study. I remember, who was it? DB Sweeney
Yeah.
said to me, we were really, really young babies, and someone said to him, some big star said, you're going to get your shot. Be ready. And that stuck in my mind. And when I got my shot on Northern Exposure, which was, after 10 years, mind you, right out of the Malcolm Gladwell book, 10,000 Hours, 10 Years, like to the day, I was so confident. I mean, I knew how to do not to say I didn't have a ton more to learn, and I did, but I knew I was ready to deliver, and I did. And I think that's important, studying and doing. I did 100 plays. I mean, I did so many shitty little plays that nobody saw. We would do these plays where if the equity said that if the cast were larger than the audience, then we didn't have to perform. but we would do it anyway. We would perform for 3 people because it's how you learn it. It's how you get, it takes a long time. It took me anyway, a long time to figure out how to get in my body and how to get free and be able to use all that was going on around me and incorporate it. And all those little plays that were just terrible were great learning lessons, experiences.
Well, you sort of answered my next question, because I wanted to talk about work ethic, because a lot of times people think that actors just pop up out of the blue. And what you're saying is there was 10 years of working and training. And my next question was, what were your feelings about training, and who were some of your most inspired teachers? And do you have any like golden nuggets that you still remember that were like pivotal moments in your training?
Absolutely. My first teacher that didn't last long was a guy named William Hickey, who won an Oscar for a movie called Prizzi's Honor. And I was really young, and I showed up down at HB Studios that was started by Uta Hagen and Herbert Berghoff. And that was one of the big spots in New York where actors went. And he had a thermos of some kind of alcohol, and he would get just pie-eyed and just didn't, he scared me, so I didn't stay long. I ended up my first real teacher that had a kind of a mentor relationship. And I mean, in high school, actually, my high school teacher, I think, saw promise and really encouraged me. But my first major teacher was out of a place called Ensemble Studio Theater in New York, and her name was Melody Summers. And I was with her for a good couple of years, good 2, 3, 4 years, and I could tell the way she looked at me that she knew I had something going on, but she wasn't going to just, she wasn't there to praise me or to coddle me. She was there to kick my ass and teach me about technique, which was a word that I could never understand. What is technique? I didn't understand it. And then finally through her, I did. And then eventually I ended up with a guy named Fred Karaman, who, all this is kind of Meisner's method.
Meisner. Okay, so that's when you say I finally learned about technique, you were learning Meisner.
Yeah, and in essence, I mean, and the next big epiphany was reading the book called On Acting by Sanford Meisner.
So
and they say you can't learn acting from a book. Well, that changed my life, and I would not be sitting here if it weren't for that book, because what it did was it taught me the magic as if,
yes.
which is using your imagination and your memories to create, to build an emotional framework for what you're going through as the character. And therefore, I could use all the pain and the hardship that I'd experienced in my life, and I could inject it into the work. I often say that art is the greatest revenge, because I could take this hurt and put it in, and I learned the techniques of how to do that, and it was like boom. That was at least 5. I'd already even done a movie before, but I still didn't know what I was doing. But then it was like it changed my whole game, and I started to get really worthwhile projects in New York theater, Robbie Bates plays and Kenny Lonergan, and and then I was looked at as like a different actor, and then I was on a trajectory that led me to Northern.
Yeah, I studied with Meisner. I studied with Sandy, and I just remember those classes. I saw some of the best work ever in those classes, just because people were just completely present.
Yeah, and also it for me in the technique stuff, which is very, we had to do it for a couple of years before we were allowed to do scenes, basically, and it's hard because that is not where you see great work, but you see people struggling to try to understand what it takes to live inside a character. Yeah, it was crucial.
It's crucial. I have a lot of people who just come and they say, I want to be an actor. And I always say, you got to get into a class, because there's this illusion that it doesn't take work to to do the kind of work that you do, and it's crucial. Can you share with us how you like to prepare for a role?
Yeah. You know, I start as soon as possible. The first thing I do, I write copious notes. And by the way, there's this app called Scriptation, and full disclosure, I'm a partner in it, but it's changed my life in terms of how easy it is to write notes on a script. I do it on my iPad. It's so amazing. And what's great, I use it as a director, I use it as an actor, and I write copious notes. I mean, my scripts look like an insane person because I just got all these references and things. But the problem is that when the next draft comes out, I have to decide whether I'm going to copy over the notes. And with this app, you just hit a button and all the notes get transferred. It's genius. Wow. But anyway, I start kind of reading it a lot. I just read it as much as I can over and over, and I let impressions land on me and I write them down. Some of which I never even refer to again, but it's like pentimento with a painter. You know, they oftentimes they say you can, you know, the original ideas seep through the final image, and so it all becomes layers of building this world. I instantly scratch out all the punctuation and all the direction, unless it's something that's, you know, obviously essential, but all the kind of like, you know, he smiles or stuff like that, I scratch all that out. And then I start running it. There's a great app for learning lines that I just used for the first time called Line Learner, and that changed. I did Death of a Salesman last year, and that was a game changer for learning lines. I don't have a problem learning lines, but it is physically painful.
Yeah.
When I do it. It hurts. I've been doing it for I don't know, 35 years or something like that. I've never, ever, not once, ever shown up to a job 150% off book. You could knock me down. You could stand on my face. You could slander my name all over the place, and I can keep going and ad lib and get back. And it's not that I'm great, but I work immense amount of time to do it so that I can be free when I show up. And people think, oh, it's so easy for him, but I am tortured. But then again, I don't start that process until then. Once I start reading the scenes, imagining the other characters where they might be. Eventually I start walking around as if I would block it in my head, where I might move. I start acting out the scenes, you know, and some of it starts to seep in. And then I start making my choices, my preparations, my objectives, my activities, my actions, my relationships to the characters, all copious notes, you know, writing down, refining, trying to find my way. You know, for instance, if I'm playing a psychotic arsonist, there's nothing about that that's me. But I have to find out what would get me there. You know, what would it take for me to be in that thing? Or what can I imagine that I'm doing that's different that I would do? So I write all this stuff down. I work on it for as long, if I have a long window, you know, on Billions, they send me the script 3 weeks in advance. So I have a ton of time to do this process, you know. And then after a week or so, if I've got 3 weeks, say, a week and a half or so, I plot it out in my mind. Like, I'm going to do 4 days of this, then 4 days of that, then 4 days of memory, you know. And then I do this thing where I sit down. Now, if it's a play, I'll use this app. But if it's 10 pages of, I just have this way I've done it, which is I just start going line by line and adding lines in my memory and doing it until I can do 2 or 3 in a row. And then I do it and I add a 5th line, a 6th line, and I can kind of picture the page. So I know I've done 1 page. Then I do the next page. I get it all in, and then I start running it. And I do it to an obsessive compulsive degree. I do I do it once I have it in my head. I then every day until I shoot, which could be now a week and a half more, I will spend probably 2 hours a day if it's just 2 or 3 scenes, say, and I will first act out the scene. Now I've memorized it. I've made all my choices. Still getting new ideas, still getting new choices, writing them down. I will act it out twice. Then I will sit down and I will run it from memory just for memory, no acting, no emphasis, and I'll do it 3 times in a row as fast as possible, so it doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
And then I take a little breath, and then I do it 2 more times. That's 5 times. Then I act it out 2 more times. Then I go back and I do the 5 times again. Then I act it out 2 more times. Then I do it 5 times again. Then I act it out 2 more times. And I do it 5 times again. And then I end up with just acting it at the end. So by the time after a few days of this, it's what I call grafted onto me. It is me. I am it. There's no separation. I've figured out a way to say these lines so that they would be something I would be saying. And the only other thing I'll leave you with is that I've been doing it for 35 years, and every single, and as I said, never shown up, never, not once. Every single time I start the process, I think it's impossible. I'll never be able to do it. Nobody could do this, and I'm going to fail in a miserable way. It's impossible.
That's the plight of the artist, right? It's what keeps you on your toes, and it's what keeps you working so hard. If you could just phone it in, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and the joy of that, of the fruit of that labor is that when I show up, as Jack Nicholson said, I come to work to play. And I can play. Like I can roll, and I can go in any which way anyone. I can do it any which way anyone wants. I'm completely flexible and open, and I'm not. Most of the time, when actors are stressed, it's because they haven't done the work.
Right.
And it happens too much. A lot of actors don't go through that process. And mind you, they're great. There's a lot of really good actors that don't do this and come off really well, either through editing or just through their natural talent. But to me, you're leaving a lot on the table.
Right. It's not as rich. It's not as layered.
I think.
I have a question about when you were younger and you were, starting your career, maybe after Northern Exposure, whenever, did you have consciously a particular roadmap that you had for yourself in terms of what projects or roles you were interested in? Were you open, or were you specific about your career?
Well, I was specific in that, and this is a kind of an old school thinking that I think if over from a complete career perspective probably hurt me, or definitely hurt me. I know it hurt me. My whole goal was to do something different every time out. So after Northern Exposure, I got, inundated with neurotic Jewish urban guys. I got offered the Jeff Goldblum part in Independence Day, and I turned it down, right? I turned it down, which was stupid in that it would have given me box office numbers that would have helped me. But I didn't want to do it. Like, I didn't want to. I just felt like I had to do something that was radically different, which ended up being a movie called Last Dance that I did with Sharon Stone. It's not necessarily the greatest career advice. Matthew Broderick, who's a wonderful, talented actor, stayed pretty much in the vein of playing this version of himself. And it's served him in terms of having a long career. But I don't regret it. I've learned a lot, and I like the body of work that I've been able to create by kind of not going down the conventional road.
I love that. And did you feel like you had the power to do that before Northern Exposure, or was it after Northern Exposure?
No, I had no power before Northern Exposure. I mean, I still was I was doing a lot of different kinds of, I always loved trying to create different characters, but, a long run in New York was playing these kind of rebellious, young teenage, kind of tough guys. And then, as I said, once I had that epiphany reading Sanford Meisner's book, it changed, and I could play I could play almost anything. I felt like, and then I put it to the test. I mean, my heroes growing up were always reinventing themselves, and so that's what I thought. I thought that's what you're supposed to do. I didn't think I I didn't think, oh, I'm being unconventional. I thought, no, I'm being an artist, and we try to do it anew each time out.
Yeah. Can you share with everyone how you dealt with rejection over the years, and if that's changed for you as you grew?
Yeah, it's changed lately. You know, I'm just older, wiser, more comfortable in it, and I've achieved certain things. So that said, I still, you know, I used to get a bad review and get in bed on, you know, I get a bad review on a Friday and get in bed and wouldn't get out till Monday. You know, it hurts. You know, the thing I'd say that saves me perhaps is always being on to something else.
Mm.
You know, whether it's my own projects that I'm, you know, I always have projects that I'm working on myself. And so I can either get right into those or, or, you know, give myself a break. Like, look, if I, let's say I've worked on a play or a movie or something or a TV show and it tanks and disappears, you know, I give myself a couple of days to get, you know, get drunk or stoned or, you know, do nothing, you know, go for a walk, buy myself something. I'll tell you, I have a funny rejection story. I mean,
I love it. Tell it.
I made a movie called Maze, and it starred Laura Linney. I wrote it, I co-wrote it, and I directed it, and I ended up starring in it by default, not design. Leah Schreiber was going to do it, and he got a bigger job. And at the 12th hour, I had spent so much time. Devin produced it with me. I had spent so much time trying to make the movie that it was like I just had to do it and get on with it. And so I ended up playing the lead part opposite Laura, and it was all about an artist, a painter, and I wanted it to be authentic because I hate in movies when our artists are depicted and it's nothing like the reality. So I wanted all the details to be right. So I knew this friend of mine was Eric Fischel, one of the great kind of preeminent portrait painters of the 80s, one of the star, you know, New York artists of the 80s. And I asked him if I could come hang out and watch him work and interview him. And I came. I spent a lot of time with him. I took and I put all that into the movie. And whether the movies are good or bad, the details of the art are very, very authentic. And the movie came out, and I sent him back then. It was a VHS, and never heard from him.
Oh.
It's like, oh, that's weird. So finally, I was out in the Hamptons at a film festival there, and I was going to see a screening of something, and there's a movie theater in East Hampton, and right next to it is a London Jewelers, which is still there. And I walked in there before the movie, just killing time, and I spotted this Patek Philippe watch that I just fell in love with. And I had no business spending money at that time on something like this. And I loved the watch, but I was like, oh, that's crazy. Maybe someday when next big job, I would give myself a gift when I get a big paycheck. And
yeah.
So I walk in the movie theater and I see Eric, and I was like, Eric, man, what happened? I never heard from you. He says, oh, well, you did a good job. And I was like, come on, really? And he's like, no, I thought it was good. I was like, come on, really tell me. And he says, well, I thought it was awful. I thought everything about it. I thought it was like a TV movie. I didn't like the way it was shot. I didn't like the way it was edited. I didn't like anything about it.
Oh,
He just fucking destroyed it. And I just went, oh, okay. All right, cool. Well, I appreciate you telling me that. I walked out of the theater, didn't go to the screening, walked into the jeweler and bought the watch.
Yes,
and I still have it, and I was able to afford it. But that's how I deal with rejection.
Oh my gosh. So, kind of hand in hand with that, I don't know why I put this question under this, but because you're a director also now, I'm sure that you see actors come into the audition room and they're nervous. And I'm just wondering if you had to deal with nerves, or if you have any advice to actors about being nervous.
Yeah, it's hard, First of all, I think overly preparing, preparing a lot so that you can not worry about knowing it, right? Because that's an easy way to throw yourself.
Right.
I think breathing, I think visualization, I think staying away from the other actors outside, not getting into a whole schmooze fest. That's my thing. Certain people may find the other way, that it may relax them to just be in the world. I like to put on music, and I meditate and I visualize positive experiences. I visualize the people, even if I don't know what they look like. I imagine them, or I picture their name, and then I picture someone smiling, at the end of it. I do all this kind of visualization of positivity, which helps. And sometimes sometimes you get nervous and you can't get past it. But, you know, I think you can ask to do it again. I know early in my career, when casting directors started to become champions of mine, I could say, "Can I do it again, again?" And they'd let me look at it and do it again, And so I would get past the nerves that way. A lot of times, I think what might be a good step is to build the fear into your uh, process,
Oh, I love that.
So that the auditionees have a place in your imaginary story, and that so it fuels you. So the nerves are just like, I mean, it's perfect if you're in a scene where you have to be scared, right? Because then you're like, well, what's really scaring me is that I'm not going to get the job. So you can you can channel that energy. It's very hard to be calm, cool, and collected if you're not.
Right.
But I think I'd say preparation, and volume, doing as much as you can, so that you have experience doing it. Audition for everything they ask you to. Do every play you can. It does build up a kind of confidence. I wish I could offer. I know I know there must be other things I've done, but the main thing is building them into the stops.
Okay. I also kind of along the same lines. A lot of times this business is very brutal. And so there's long stretches where you won't have work. And I just wondered what you do during those down times to keep yourself motivated and inspired to keep doing the work.
Well, it's funny because early on I had that, I realized that there was going to be, even in great success, there was going to be big patches of open time. And I started taking guitar. I played drums as a kid, and I started taking guitar in my early 20s, and it's become my salvation, And I also studied photography in the New School in New York, and that ultimately led me to directing. And both of those things are a great way for me to spend time. I mean, I spend 5 hours a day playing music pretty much now. And,
wow.
And it gives me great joy and satisfaction. I think performers need to express. You talk about what we come into this world with, and I have this innate need to express. Like I have to do it, and I can go in my studio there and express, and I can be in front of, I can find the same joy I'd find in front of 1,000 people or in front of nobody, because it's something that connects me to, when we're free in expression, there's a channeling of something going on, and
yes.
And I get a kind of euphoria from it. So I think you have to develop other disciplines, exercise, other hobbies that are artistic, that you can have autonomy over.
I think that also plays into before about having nerves. It's like if acting is the only outlet that you have, that could actually add to the nerves, because you're walking into an audition needing the role instead of just expressing yourself, knowing that later you're going to go express yourself in another way. It's not the only thing.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly right. Yeah, you have to be a full-rounded person. I read a zillion biographies and actor profiles years ago. I'm hard pressed to read them anymore, but I did read Bryan Cranston's most recent book, his biography, and he has great wisdom about auditioning that I think everyone should read, at least those chapters. He really is cogent about how he was able to turn his career around, and he gives great anecdotes and specificity to what he did, and I really would suggest people take a look at that.
What is the name of that book? Do you know? I can Google it. I can Google it really.
Yeah, it's I don't know if he's written a lot of books, but it's his biography.
Okay. I'm curious, how soon into your acting career did you know that you wanted to direct, and was the transition easy?
Well, as my friend Evan Handler said, I wanted to direct ever since I'd been directed. No, I didn't think about it. Although, in retrospect, again, everything, you can find these veins if you go back, but photography, which I had learned from my dad, who was an amateur photographer, was my way of starting to look at the world and tell a story in a picture. And I was gestating that unconsciously, but it wasn't until Northern that I thought, oh, I want to direct. And that's where I started directing. Although I guess I had done a play or two, but I intuitively understood the camera, because of my time photographing. And so it was just, it just felt like a natural step. And I could have directed on Northern, but I think I smartly didn't, because there's a thing in TV where on a regular basis, maybe not some of the big cinematic shows that we have now, but which I think Northern was the one of the earliest cinematic. I call it the cinematizing of television, but the pattern of the way it's done becomes a certain machine. And I often joke that my mother could come in and direct one of these episodes, and it would get done because everyone rallies behind it. I tell this story where every show I've ever done, once a year, someone shows up as a director that's a disaster, that it's a favor, and it's someone or whatever, and not only are they terrible, they alienate everyone. They yell, like everyone from the drivers to the actors to the caterer. Everyone's like walking around saying, what is this? Who is this? And I'll be thinking, this is never, and I have to keep my mouth shut because I can't I have to just stay quiet and let it happen, and maybe offer some ideas to grab a shot here that you might want. But I'm thinking, this is never going to cut together.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I'll be on the street, and everywhere I go, people say, hey, that episode you guys did with the thing, that was the best one you all ever did. I'll be like, what? And it's that person who was a disaster. And I say, and what happens is, when you're doing these things, the machine thing, when you have a director that can't do it, everyone rises to make the show what it already is.
Right.
That's not I'm not advocating for shitty directors, because good ones make a big difference. But it's a fascinating thing. And I knew this early on. And so I said, I'm just going to make short films to kind of see if I could get on screen what I see in my head.
Oh, so that's how you started.
Yeah.
You started making short films.
Yeah, and I was able to kind of use I could sneak in and use the equipment on the weekends and the sound stages and.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what is the difference between working with a director on set that is also an actor and working with is there a difference between a director who has never been an actor and a director who has been an actor?
Well, I think, the first short I made, I storyboarded the hell out of every detail. I knew exactly what I was doing. And up till then, by the way, I was a pain in the ass. Not a pain in the ass, not like a prima donna, but I was this quixotic New York actor who was all about truth.
Yes.
And up till then, so I make this short film, I storyboard everything. I come on the set, and I say to my friend who's playing the lead part, I say, okay, you're going to come in the door and you're going to sit here. And he's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I would never do that. Why would I do it? And everyone I'd ever said no to, like, flashed before my eyes. And from that moment on, I became, I think, probably one of the easiest actors in the world to work with. And the other thing I'll say is about truth, because even when I was a pain in the ass, I think I was probably right in a purely artistic thing, but but I didn't handle it right, and it wasn't my position to do it. But I think of this thing that Stanley Kubrick said to Jack Nicholson on The Shining. Stanley was notorious for a lot of takes, and it was just a shot of Jack opening a door. And they were on take 110 or something.
Oh my God.
And finally, Jack loses it. And he's like, what the fuck do you want from me? I spend my whole life getting it real. It's real. What do you want from me? What do you want? And then there's this like pause, and over the microphone, because I guess he sat away, you hear Stanley Kubrick say, sometimes real isn't good enough, Jack.
Oh!
And it's a great lesson, because what we're feeling is not necessarily what's necessary or what's coming across. I have thought I was the greatest actor in the world, and I look at the rushes and I was awful. I've thought I was the worst actor in the world and felt suicidal, looked at the rushes and thought I was brilliant, and every variation in between. So ultimately, you really have to be in the service of the director.
Yes, yes. So directing completely changed how you acted on set because you got some of your own medicine.
Absolutely.
So for actors I say all the time, you need to be nice to everyone because
Well, that's a big thing too. Yeah, I mean, that's just a general rule in life, I think. Be nice. But in terms of, you just have to look. It's a fine line, and there's no formula. You need to stand up for what you believe. You need to try to defend your point, but you need to know when it's time to get off it and get done.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested when you're directing a show and you're in the casting process. What draws you? Is there I know it's sort of amorphous and, maybe unexplainable, but is there something in particular that draws you to a particular actor when you're in the casting process?
Absolutely. I mean, it's their sense of truth. And one thing I do is I will often ask actors to do versions of a scene that aren't necessarily right or how I plan to do it, but just to see if I can get them. I'll be like, do it screaming, just scream to see, or just do it where you're laughing, do it where you're happy, where you're sad, like just to see how malleable and flexible they are. When Warren Beatty directs, he literally says, do anything. Do one where you think you're stoned. Do one where you're tired. Do one where you're pissed off. Do one where you're horny. Do one where you're hungry. Like, and it's not that those are the results he's going for, but they become these catalysts to take us to a place we haven't been. So I want to see that the actor, when I say try this, they're not going to say, well, why? I don't. If they really need to know, I want to explain to them. But if it's just because I want to see what happens, I want them to be that flexible.
Yeah. So you're looking for someone who's open to change, in the room.
Yeah. And that's why they have to know what they're doing in terms of knowing lines, because if I'm sitting, it's just a drag when you're trying to get a performance because everyone else suffers, and when you're in the editing room, it doesn't matter if so-and-so has a great take on this line, if this is the only take I can use because this is the only one the person said the line right that's usable. It's frustrating.
I wonder if this is going to be the same answer, but once you've narrowed it down to, let's say, 2 people for the role, what usually wins the actor the job? Is it the same answer as before, or is it different?
Nah, it's so many variables, and usually, like, mostly I direct TV, and it's not my decision. I can make my push. Although the smaller the part, generally they'll let me choose who I want, and so I'm choosing based on what I went through in the audition. In the larger parts, it's you know, as you know, it's whether they have any, whether they're well known or they have any, you know, Q ratings or whatever, or social media, or they're blonde and the lead's dark haired, or they're you know, or they're too tall or they're too short, or you know, how does it look in the whole visual, like, you know, how are they going to fit into the tableau? Sometimes it's just that, you know, and oftentimes it's, you know, it's just subjective. You know, the person who has the decision liked that person for who knows why.
Right, right. God, I want to ask another question, but I don't want to not be able to ask these. From a director's perspective, when you've been sitting in the room watching actors, what have you learned about actors' misconceptions about auditioning?
Well, you know, the actors that come in and take a spot and stand there, you know, just bore me right away. I want to see someone come in and own the room. I want to see them move the chair. When I have to audition, you know, I take over that room. I like take a chair and I put a script down, or I move a thing, or I ask if I can sit on the floor. I ask if I can move. Am I going to be able to get up? Am I going to move around? You know, I want to just see someone who's comfortable in the process.
That's so exciting. You just got me so excited just saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the main thing, is just seeing that they, you know, because you really, as I said, when I was talking about how I prepare, directors want you to bring in all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, even if they blocked it. So I come in with, like, when I show up on a set, I know 3 or 4 different ways it could block. I don't tell them that. I don't say, here's my blocking idea. I just start doing it. I walk over there to the cooler at that moment and take a sip of water as the person's talking. And the director, oh, that's good. Do that. I'm like, he doesn't know. I blocked it in my mind. But like, and if he said don't do it, I would say I would not do it, you know. But they want that. You know, we don't want to have to tell you what to do. We want to capture it. Yeah. And so the more you can bring of reality of the behavior, I love behavior, you know, you know, stuff you do, business you do, that so it just makes our job so much easier.
Yeah, and do you build that in? What, you know, you said you take all these copious notes. Are you also building in behavior with those notes?
Absolutely.
So that's,
yeah, and as I said, I'm rehearsing in my room, so I'm actually doing it. You know, I'm putting a glass of water over there, and then I know I'm gonna go get it on that line, or I'm gonna pour a drink, or I'm gonna light a cigar, or I'm gonna put on my shoes, or take off my hat, or you know, and I don't get locked into any of this stuff. Like I can throw it away on a thing, but it just I start to inhabit this space, and so I can then either use it or not, depending on what works with everyone else.
It's just useful behavior in terms of informing who this person is. Again, it's layering, right? It's just layering.
Yeah. And it's tricky, like, you know, if you're a guest star on it, if you're coming in as a guest on a TV show, you know, you often have actors on TV shows, for good or bad, that are doing it so much. They're there so many days that they don't want to work hard. They don't want to think. They just want to get it done with. And it's not what I like, but you have to kind of understand you're a guest in their house, and you have to play by their rules. So when that person says, you know, don't do that, you know, you have to just kind of roll with it and know your place. And still, you know, a lot of times if you're cool and you don't get too precious with it, the director may come in and say, no, I like it, let them do that. And then the actor will go, oh, okay. You know, so you got to just understand what's going on and try not to take anything personal, because it's a tough gig to do, you know, episode in, episode out. And if as numbered, you know, high up on the call sheet, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. what is your process with working on actors on the set? Do you take a more hands-off approach, or are you kind of like with your acting? Or have you made all these notes? Do you see the scenes in your head so you've preset the actions that you want the actors to take?
Yeah, but I then try. It's really well thought out. But I also think up options, like what if the actor doesn't want to do this? What am I going to see? How is it going to screw up how can I adapt? Because and I don't necessarily impose. I mean, sometimes you have to say, okay, we're walking in this door and we're walking out that door. You have to kind of set that up. But what happens between there and there, who knows? I always try to rehearse in the beginning without telling anyone any as little as possible, and see what they come up with. See whether they organically fall into what, a lot of times it's logic. If you're cooking pasta on the stove, you're cooking pasta on the stove. If you have to get the milk out of the refrigerator, you're getting the milk out of the refrigerator. So it's all kind of, logical. But I try to keep it as open as possible for as long as possible, so that the actor can create and bring something to it. Meanwhile, I've already been telling them, they're already lighting it, so I know it's coming. It's coming in a certain way, and because of the nature of the schedule, it has to. There will be times where I say, well, sometimes real isn't good enough.
Right. When have you had this happen when you've hired an actor and they're on set and you need a specific moment from them that they aren't for some reason able to get to? Is there a way that you've worked, like, is there a way that you kind of help that actor get where they need to go?
Well, yeah, for sure. And I always have to just figure out I have to think ahead in terms of how I'm going to edit it, how I'm going to get what I want, how I'm going to be able to make the scene work. I can't leave the room without something that's going to work. So, I'll do whatever it takes. But I also want to go back to, my directing style. I like, and a lot of actors don't like this. Dana Delaney told me she'd go crazy with me, and Titus Welliver said he couldn't work with me, and because, and meanwhile, I don't do this a lot. A lot of times I'm in situations where I can't do this. But in my world, the best kind of film directing is creating in the moment. It's the way Judd Apatow, the comedian directors, direct. They're like, say he's a dog, say he's ugly, call him a bitch. They're just throwing shit out, and there's all this stuff flying. Now, obviously, you have to do it with sensitivity. If it's a dramatic scene and there's emotional, you don't want to be screaming. But I think that you get that magic if the actors are open and flexible and willing. If they take that ball and throw it back, you have that magic on film. It's there. And you can use it. That said, there are a lot of actors that don't want to hear someone talking, and I've had to learn to accept that that's their thing and make it work. And if it's not coming, as you asked, like, I do know a lot about psychology and emotional intelligence and triggers and things that I can offer to the actor to help him. I can make a loud noise if they have to be scared off screen. I can say awful things to them, or I can get the other actor off camera. Whatever it takes, whatever's good for them.
Yeah.
And they're in charge. But I'm fearless with my willingness to go into to go as dark and deep as anyone will let me or wants to.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you if you could say anything to the actors that are listening, any words of inspiration or wisdom that you would leave them with, what would you say?
Well, I'd say read On Acting if you haven't read it. Watching the making of films, maybe not as much these days, but the older films, a lot of times they have these making of videos where you can see the process, is really valuable. Masterclass has a couple. Dustin Hoffman does one. You have some directors up there. Aaron Sorkin does a writing one. I've taken a zillion. I took Dustin's. I took Christina Aguilera's. I'm taking Herbie Hancock's right now. What's great about them? Most of them are not necessarily great teachers, but getting the insights of how those great artists that have this wealth of body of work do what they do is invaluable. And that's why, again, when you're early on in your career, getting on sets just to watch, just to see how it's done is gold, because that stuff seeps into you. And again, I would say preparation and sacrifice. If you've got an audition tomorrow, you can't go out tonight. You just can't. You can't get drunk and you can't get high. You got to sacrifice for your craft. And the next night you can, but that I distinctly remember early successes I had being in audition rooms and talking to my friends who were all hungover, or not all, but some of them were hungover or with their girlfriend or their boyfriend or whatever. And I could tell that I had an edge because that I was so focused. And so you got to be willing to, I think a lot of my 20s were sacrificed to learning and trying to find my way into the business, and do as much as you can. It doesn't matter if it's shitty. It doesn't matter if anyone's going to see it. It matters that again, on all my what I learned from Melody, full circle here in terms of my technique, was I have a personal objective. What do I want to experience doing this work? And so that it becomes a life process. Well, the other thing I'll say is watch your work. A lot of actors don't like to watch themselves, and at this point in my life, it doesn't really interest me. But I got it early on. I had in my deal to get dailies on Northern Exposure.
Yeah.
And I studied those for 5 years. I pretty much watched 5 years of dailies, and I learned so much. And if you watch my performance from episode 1 to episode 101, you will see a real shift in style.
Wow.
I went from someone who came out of the theater, would be like this, to someone who'd be like, I don't know, it's a question of how you want to say it. Letting the camera pick up on me, not putting it into it.
Yeah.
And I think you have to what you do is when you watch yourself enough, you get past the vanity. So you're not thinking, oh, I'm fat or I'm ugly or whatever. You start to watch for truth, and you start to watch habits. Oh, I'm always cocking my eye up,
Yeah.
And so you start to get control of those, so that at least if you're doing it, you've made the choice.
Right.
Everything you do is a choice, and you just have to make sure you're in charge of them.
I just want to say thank you.
Sure.
You're amazing. This was awesome. You gave so many good nuggets.
Oh, good. My pleasure.
Oh, I'm just so beyond honored. Thank you.